And good day to you all. I want to tell a story today. This is a story about my daughter Kelly and her 31st birthday last summer. It was July 2023. She was turning 31, and I was looking for that perfect gift for her. And I had an inspiration. I was reminded of a project that she and I had worked on 20 years before when she was in seventh grade. We were working on a project with fossil fish. And it gave me an inspiration that I would develop this as a birthday present for her last year. I taught biology at Barry University in South Florida for 35 years, but way before then, I had a lifelong interest in paleontology, fossils. I remember in kindergarten being fascinated by dinosaurs and 9 years old, 10 years old, collecting fossils out in the woods behind our house. So I always had an interest in paleontology and prehistory. In 2017, I was starting my final year before retirement, and a great opportunity came up. I inherited a comparative vertebrate anatomy course. My friend Dr. Sanborn was going out on sabbatical, and I took his course over for the fall 2017 semester, and it sort of reignited a great passion I had for vertebrate paleontology. In the early 1990s, I was interested in developing research projects for our undergraduates at Barry University, and I stumbled upon something called the Stonefish Company. It was produced by the Ulrich family out in Wyoming. They would collect sandstone from the Green River Formation. It's a 50 million year old sandstone deposit. And they would box up these slabs of sandstone, and they wouldn't guarantee a perfect fossil, but every slab that they boxed up would have some sort of fossil fish in it. And for $25, you could pick these up. And I had some research money, so I was picking these up quite a bit during the early 1990s. And then whenever a student said they wanted to work on a research project, I'd invite them to come into the lab and work on the fossil fish. This is Kemmerer, Wyoming. It's southwest Wyoming near the Utah border, well south of Yellowstone National Park. It's kind of a dry, dusty kind of place, not very inhabited. But the Green River Valley is an area of the country where 47 million years ago it was actually a lake environment very close to a lowland inland sea in the central United States. Out in Kemmerer, you can go out and collect fossils. There are permits that are involved, but the Ulrich family has been harvesting fossils here for a long time, and they're right at the surface. You can go out and scratch around on the ground and find fossils. This is looking back 47 million years ago to the Kemmerer region when it wasn't so dry and it wasn't so harsh. In fact, it was a lowland river lake environment close to a coastal sea. And the lake would fill up rapidly and expand in size in the spring with the spring rains. And then during the summer, when the temperature goes up and evaporation begins, the lake would begin to shrink and decrease in depth, and especially along the mud flats and sandy flats around the edge of the lake. In the late summer, the lake would begin to drop drastically and dry drastically, and every summer thousands and thousands of fish would get caught in the sand, and they would eventually desiccate. And before they were lost to scavengers or lost to the forces of erosion, they might get covered over with some silt or some sand. This is a slab of the Stonefish company that I received. It was a $25 purchase, and it's about the size of a dinner plate, and it kind of feels like one of those old-fashioned heavy dinner plates. It's thick. It's a little on the fragile side. They're kind of like dinner plates. They can fracture if you're not careful. You can see there's some thickness to them, and I'm going to talk about the thickness and what it says. And you can see I'm going to turn on my laser pointer for a second here, and I want to show you that this area right in here seems to have very fine striations in them. And these are layers and layers and layers of silt or sand. Every time the lake shrank in the late summer, early fall, it would deposit some silt and sand on top of the dead fish, and then the lake would fill up the following year, and you would go through this year after year cycle, and the year after year cycle would leave these layers. This is a very close-up of the edge of this fossil plate. This is a little over a millimeter in thickness. It's about the thickness of a little bit thicker than your little fingernail. That's a penny for scale comparison. In the early 1990s, I ran across, in a literature search, an obscure geological study, the paleontology of the Green River Formation, with a review of the fish fauna. This was by an interesting scientist, Lance Grand. I'm a little bit of a contemporary of his. He's a couple years younger than me, but he did his PhD dissertation out in the Green River Formation. And this was a publication that came from the Geological Survey of Wyoming, a little bit on the obscure side. This is Lance Grand. Today he's a curator at the Chicago Field Museum, and he got his start with the Green River fauna, and he developed a whole series of studies out of it and launched him in his career. I was inspired by Grand. I wanted to follow his work and see if I could contribute to it in some way. Coming back to the edge of the sandstone plate that I had, this is a photograph from Grand's 1980 paper. He has a 1 millimeter marker here indicating 1 millimeter of thickness, approximately 30 to 40 years of geological time by his estimate. He was going in and very carefully counting the layers of silt and sand in these slabs. I did some back of the envelope calculations. I did some measurements, and my guesstimate is that the slab of limestone or sandstone that I'm working with here, about 1.3 millimeters, a little thicker, wider than your little fingernail, covers approximately 50 years of deposition along the lake edge by Grand's estimates. Grand also did a very good job of outlining the fine anatomy of a number of fossil fish species. I'm going to focus on two of them. He had published extensively on two species of fossil fish that were very common in the Green River Formation, and they happen to be the major fish that are found in all the slabs of stone that you buy from the Stone Fish Company. This is a publication in 1982 by Grand in the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. This is the genus Diplomistus. Not a very large fish. They're about 6 inches, 8 inches in length. Not very large, but particularly abundant. They're a freshwater fish species that wound up in huge numbers, by the thousands, in the Green River fossil deposits. And anyone who goes out and prospects, it doesn't take a lot of effort to find these in the sandstone. Another common species of fish out there, this is genus Knightia. And I discovered Knightia in one of my early fossil slabs that I did myself. And then some other students came in and did a lot of work on their fossil slabs. Well, I discovered that I brought a number of these back from Florida with me in retirement. I have about 10 or so of these slabs still around, a couple of them unfinished. And in fact, I did find one that was just started. Someone didn't get very far with it, but I decided I was going to unpack it and see if I could finish the job. My workstation involves good lighting and magnifying glass that I use, and a little scraping tool. And I would go in and scrape away pieces of sand, working an hour or two a day for a few weeks. I could uncover a fossil. It's interesting work, but it's kind of tedious. You're staring through the magnifying glass because the fish bones, some of them are very, very fine and delicate, and it's not too hard to damage them during excavation here. This was a piece that I finished in 1992, summer of 1992. This is genus Nidea, and it was my own preparation. It took me about 2 months to uncover this fish from the naked sandstone all the way down into the layers containing the bones. This is genus Diplomistus. One of my students, Nancy Singh, did this plate in the fall of 1994. She spent about 2.5 months on this piece. It's not easy scraping away all that sand. You have to be very careful and delicate because the bones are very fine and they break very easily with undue pressure. So you have to be very patient to work on these. In 2004, this is me with my two daughters, Kelly and Kristen, and both Kelly and Kristen were always interested in the fossil plates, and they would come over and work on plates. When they had a weekend, they'd come over. Instead of going to the movies, they might sit down with one of these fossil plates and pick away at it for a while. Especially Kelly. Kelly wanted her own plate to work with. So in 2005, that's Kelly in 2005. On the left, she was in 7th grade at the time. That's Kelly last year on her 31st birthday, and she still looks the same to me. Anyways, Kelly wanted her own fossil plate to work on, so I set her up in 2005. And she went to work. She spent about 2 weeks uncovering this much of the fossil. Very tedious, and it frustrated her a little because she started complaining that the bones were breaking. They were chipping away with the sand, and she got a little frustrated with it. And finally, after about 2 weeks, she kind of hung up the needle and said, I can't break any more of these bones. I think it was on her last day. She went up to the corner and she etched her name in the corner of the plate, sort of memorializing the work. And then we put the plate away. And I forgot about it. I went on with my life. She went on with her life. And I packed it away. I moved up to New York in retirement. And last year, I decided this is what I'm going to do for Kelly. I'm going to get this fossil plate out. I just remembered it. I dug it out of a packing box, and I had about a month to go, or about 6 weeks to go before her birthday. And I thought, why don't I try and uncover this fossil? I've got time to do it now. So I went to work. June 5th, I was spending anywhere from 1 to 3 hours a day. I can't go too long on these. It's very tedious. It can be frustrating when you're chipping away at these little bones. June 6th, a little bit more. June 7th. June 9th. And I'm starting to uncover more and more fine anatomical detail. Some of the head bone pieces. We have some major pharyngeal gill arch design here. We have the eye orbital here. The upper and lower jaw were a little bit fractured in this piece, but you can start to see some of the detail developing, especially along the spinal column here. June 11th, work continues. June 12th, I was uncovering more and more, and I wanted to use a scale of reference, so I got a wooden ruler that was marking millimeter distances. These fish are not very big, maybe about 6-7 inches in length. They're not very big, but you can see there's tremendous anatomical detail beginning to emerge. And so I was concentrating on removing material here and here, especially down near the anal fin area. June 16th, work goes on. June 17th, more and more. June 20th. And finally, June 27th, I had reached the point where I was starting to damage the fine bones a little bit too much, and I thought I've uncovered about as much as I want to try and uncover without damaging any more of the fine bones in place. So June 27th was a good stopping point, and that would give me plenty of time to get it worked up into a birthday present for Kelly in late July. I went to work on anatomical comparisons. This is our fish here, and this is a diagram that Grand had published in 1982. So I was able to find some very fine details of the pectoral fin, which is homologous to the human arm, and the pelvic fin, which is homologous to the human leg. Very, very fine bone structure here. And the structures were even finer and more delicate and more fragile back in the area of the anal fin and the tail fin. And it was really the tail fin that I decided to stop, because I was starting to chip away some of these very fine pieces in the tail fin. The rays of the fin structure were very, very fragile. So at any rate, I had the slab finished, and I thought to myself, wouldn't this make a great gift if I could get it framed up somehow? What if I could get it into like a picture frame? But that's beyond my skill. But I do have some relatives that are very good at woodworking. In particular, my nephew Dan Rewakowski. Dan Rewakowski is married to my niece, Carrie Murphy Rewakowski. Carrie Murphy Rewakowski is my sister Ellen's oldest child. And Dan and Carrie and Ellen and Bob is Ellen's husband, they live next door to each other up on Onondaga Hill. And in the backyard is a little workshop that Bob and Dan share. They have a whole plethora of woodworking tools, band saws, radial saws, all the stuff you need for woodworking. The inside of their wood shop is a typical woodworker's shop. Sloppy by some standards, but neat and orderly by others. They know where every tool is. They know where every nail is. But they don't like anybody else in there fooling around with their woodworking projects. Well, Dan agreed to build some framing for me, but he said, I'm going to send you out. You're going to have to go pick up the material for me. I said, okay, I can do that. Where do I go? So off to Home Depot I went. Dan gave me a list of things to pick up. We started with the framing material, the wood molding here. He told me some sizes to watch for, and I picked out some appropriate sizes, unfinished but good-looking pieces of wood. And in Home Depot, you cut your own wood. Cut it yourself, not with power saws. They're not crazy enough to turn people loose with power saws, but they do have little saws that you can cut your own pieces of wood. So I went in and bought the framing, and with Dan's measurements, we went to work on cutting the wood. So you line everything up, you measure carefully, and start cutting. You do have to be very careful with the cutting, though. Dan gave me a list of things other than the wood to pick up, special brads to use, Gorilla Glue, concrete sealer. He said that would make a nice covering for the sandstone and keep it intact. Here's Dan at work. We picked out a cool July evening and he went to work. Pulled out all the tools, put the whole thing together. And this is one piece that he finished. This is the 1992 genus Knightia that I had worked on 30 years ago, and Dan made a beautiful frame for it. Now it looks kind of like a flat, thin picture frame from the front, but that's a little deceptive because the slab of sandstone he encased completely in a wooden box framing, and then he attached the finish frame on top of the wooden box behind. So actually it's kind of a thick, heavy operation. And these are the three pieces that he finished that night. This was the Knightia that I had finished. This is Nancy Singh's Diplomistus from 1994. And this is Kelly's that she started in 2005 and I finished 18 years later. I think this piece came out really well. In fact, I asked Dan to leave enough framing so that you can still read her name etched up here. If you look carefully, you can see Kelly etched up here. Kelly placed this in her TV room. She lives over on the east side of Syracuse. And in the TV room, she has her little fish fossil sitting on the stand. And she's very happy with it, very proud that she had started it, and very happy that I had finished it. And it adds a lot to her TV room, I think. And there you have it, the story of Kelly's 31st birthday and the fossil fish that made her day. I hope you enjoyed this story.